a very unique category. It's very hard to put where it belongs to. It doesn't really belong anywhere, rather than its own little realm. It's not fougere, it's not shipper, it's not medicinal herbal fragrances. It is not just citrusy fragrances. It's intensely refreshing, potent greenery with a twist.
It started innocent enough. I got my Scentbird package. I usually order 3 decants once in 3 months. That kind of ends up working better for me. And luckily for me, the ones that I put in my queue and kind of, to be honest, forgot about and got in the mail were kind of Florida summer friendly. And the one that I've been trying to understand since yesterday is Sisley Eau de Champagne. It's been a minute since I reviewed champagne-like fragrances, or at least fragrances that either in their pyramid say that they have an accord of champagne or brut, or that have it in the name. Sisley is, to me, is a very grown-up brand when it comes to scent composition. They are the master of very polished, put together, somewhat aggressive shipper family. That's, I would say, what they probably are known for the most, and like what they really know how to do. That said, sometimes their fragrances are almost too aggressive for me, almost too unforgiving. They are kind of merciless sometimes. And Eau de Champagne is something I just threw in my queue and, as I said, like forgot about for probably a year. And now it's time. And now it's time for me to try it. So, Sisley Eau de Champagne, I mean, I guess you can read it. It's not as dramatized as what La Lique Imaginaire write in their description of perfumes, but still fairly educational. An interplay of citrus and grassy aromas that capture the essence of nature and instill a sense of well-being and refinement. An ode to French art of living. I mean, sounds good, but not very descriptive. So we here have a very potent mixture of salad type of herbs and bergamot. Bergamot, wild herbs, tomato leaves, I quite detect them there. They're quite noticeable. Lily of the Valley, maybe has some floral background, and vetiver. And that kind of started me thinking, what kind of bergamot / green, very, very green, grassy type of fragrances I have in my collection, and what is like my top? Like, what is the most kind of go-to green fragrance that I prefer? That said, especially for those of you connoisseurs of various green fragrances, fougères, shippers, and you name it, and eau de colognes, there are differences between a fougère, a shipper, eau de cologne, and what I'm going to talk about here. It's a little bit of hodgepodge, like I looked everywhere I could, trying to kind of make up my mind about what I really want to put in this category. I'm talking about not the kind of fizzy, bubbly eau de colognes. I'm not talking about heavier, heartier, and more rich fougères. I'm not talking about classical shippers either. I try to combine here these kind of very elusive collection of green perfumes that are always on the cusp. Are they too herby, too grassy? Do they have a flavor of fruit? But you cannot put them confidently in either category. So I hope that will be helpful to at least some of you. And if you hear one fragrance, I think I have a bit of a kind of a kaleidoscope, not even kaleidoscope, like a spectrum to take you through. Because to me, it's a very special category, and I struggle to really find a very crisp definition for it. It's green, herbal eau de colognes that are not aquatic bergamots, that are not bitter, and more like typical male fresh fragrance, that are not, as I said, like deeper, more meaningful fougères, that are not lemony, zesty citruses. They're always somewhat in between the categories. So when it comes Sisley, Eau de Champagne, I think that's one of these like really good examples. It has bergamot, it has some greens, and yet it's neither. I wouldn't, probably if I was forced to put it in a category, I would say this is a typical summerish eau de cologne. That said, I immediately remembered that I have in my collection another Sisley, which is Eau de Soir. I tried it once when I got it from Scentbird, and again, hashtag not sponsored, and I was horrified. Because to me, so far to this date, Eau de Soir is the most aggressive, the most bitter, the most difficult to wear citrusy fragrance, and the fragrance from Sisley in general. I would put it kind of toward Pamplemousse and grapefruity fragrances. Pamplemousse, I think that is Aqua Allegoria by Guerlain. But like these like super bitter orange or grapefruity fragrances. And yet it doesn't have this fizzy character of eau de colognes. It's very potent, stringent. It's kind of like pierces through the air, but it's very dense. It's very densely packed. It's very well defined. It never really falls or migrates away from its core. And I mean, it kind of commands respect, but I gotta be in some like really rare mood to wear this. And if I had to choose between which Sisley kind of green bergamoty fragrance to go with, I probably would pick Eau de Cologne, because I really like this unusual combination of tomato leaves with bergamot. I think it makes it feel kind of special, though I don't feel like any real reference to champagne as a drink. While Eau de Soir, wow. Let me know if you wear Eau de Soir, because like people like that must have a strong character. And then I started thinking more and more and more. These green, grassy, herbal fragrances are not quite my cup of tea, and yet I found you quite a span of things to think about if you're trying to find your favorite in this space. Yeah, let's do a spoiler alert. I think to date in my top 3 is gonna be Perfume Roma Ichnusa, ICHNUSA. Ichnasa. Thanks to my subscriber, I got these teeny tiny little nano, I would say like the Lucky Scent samples are like almost nano size. Like, how can you really get to know a perfume using like less than 1 milliliter? It's a bit of a mystery for me, but yet like for really potent fragrances it sometimes works out. So I hope I'm saying it right. Ichnusa by Perfume Roma. Rather unusual departure when it comes to the style of Perfume Roma. The only common element I see in Ichnusa with their more well-known delicious desserts in a bottle, like they make one of the most refined, appetizing, friendly, yet just alluring gourmand fragrances. I mean, check the price tag first before you run to buy them, though. Like, they are pricey, but they are delectable. This is a very different story. This is green, this is fresh, and yet it's not too citrusy and it's not too bergamoty. It's exactly that fine line between what kind of herbs are here. Is it lemongrass? Is it this? Is it that? And the common element that I see with other creations by Perfume Roma is that it is, even though it's fresh and green, it is vibrant. I would say all their perfumes have this Italian vibrancy of how they kind of blossom on the skin. Because I have other options for you that will be very close siblings of Ichnusa, but they don't have that bon vivant, they don't have that kind of vibrancy and love of life to that degree of like this like beaming smile that Perfume aroma fragrances do have. Quick sanity check. The ever so slight cheerfulness and sweetness in this fragrance is, I think, coming from the fig. So they have a fig leaf, fig tree as an accord, they have myrtle, and they have grass and hay. A lot of people will immediately point me toward other fig fragrances. I must say, only Philosopher's Eau de Toilette concentration could potentially compete, but that would be much more watery, much more lighter, and less intensely grassy. This is what is so special about this collection, that they are very intensely green without, as I keep repeating myself, without being eau de cologne, without being fougere, without falling into any of the classic categories. It's in the top 3 out of everything I'm going to show you. Beautiful in my wish list, definitely. Yet I found 2 more that are very, very close with subtleties. So see what's more affordable or what you can buy in your neighborhood. The second one I think is going to be a little bit more affordable is Miller Harris La Foule. A little bit more rhubarby, a little bit more rounded, almost like this bitter mango or like green mango-ish. And we'll talk about that kind of greenness twist in a few seconds. But again, comparatively to Ichnusa, that is just fig with grass and hay, here we're transitioning a little bit away from the fig. And it just has a little bit of more rounded sound to it. And notice, like, it's actually interesting to analyze the marketing pyramid of these fragrances because, again, obviously perfumes are made of molecules, and all these accords and comparisons are just created to simplify the description, right? To ease selection for the consumer. That said, I would call them quite similar to each other. I would call them very like the same family of fragrances. But here, I feel it's not even the head. I feel, to me, it's the heart. Is rose with tomato leaves, and then the freshness and bitterness is created by galbanum and citrus notes. All of them, I would say, have somewhat of a citrusy opening, but the base here would be like when it settles down, the dry down will be a little bit different because they're going to be cedar and oak moss. If before in Ichnusa it was vetiver, am I right? I think so. La Foule by Miller Harris is gonna kind of dry down in a slightly different fashion. But in the opening and the head and an overall impression, to me they're quite similar. They create the same kind of green feeling that is somewhat unusual. I used up half of my decant, and if not for Ichnusa, probably would be something that I would lay my eyes on for like full bottle. But then a subscriber shared her decant of Tiziana Terenzi Vele, or Vele, V-E-L-E. And here, things get even more interesting. I mean, it's a slight departure. I think it's more of a departure toward, it's green, it's very green, but it gets ever so slightly, a little bit more fruity. But in such a subtle way that I wouldn't really put it into fruity fragrance category. It's very green. It's very polished. It has a lot of it has a lot of diffusion, and it doesn't really migrate or sparkle. It's pretty much like this green stripe that goes through the air. But this time, with a little bit of this musky fruitiness at the background. The marketing team composed a pyramid that consists of 1,000 ingredients, but things that I think are essential. The sourness that is kind of in my mind created by a little bit of rose and a little bit of red currant. That's at least what they describe, and maybe papaya. The overall fruitiness in the heart that kind of becomes a little bit more apparent as it opens up is mango, passion fruit, papaya. Again, it's kind of this undetermined, uncertain tropical, but it still have a very prominent green leaves overall presence. It's like it's a burrito of tropical fruits that very tightly wrapped in green leaves. They have about like 1,000 other ingredients. I don't really know what umbu kaja tapariba is, so bear with me. Princess Tree of Polonium. Okay. Alright, let's park it with some unusual comparisons. Maybe that was the inspiration for the perfumer, or like for the team that ordered this fragrance to be made to the perfumer, but let's get real. Who knows what that is? I would say if you are somewhat unsure about what kind of greenness you go for, this is a very comfortable, fruitier greenness where neither really wins, at least in my opinion. It's just as much green as it is somewhat tropical fruity. I find that tropical fruity fragrances that are overtly fruity smell cheap to me, just like one of those, shampoos or whatever. That said, if we want to go a little bit more niche, a little bit more expensive, but still keep it very green, very verdant, very refreshing, a really beautifully packaged option would be Wilhelm Perfumery. They have these like yellow bottles, and the one that I have here is Morning Chess. This is my second sample. I fully used that one. Absolutely loved it. Here we're going a little bit less of this fresh kind of green leaves. I don't want to say cut grass, but these like fresh green grassy notes, toward more of a somewhat scratchy, musky, some musky bark, kind of green bark. It's with the kind of the fruit wrapping just the same. If you look at the marketing pyramid, however, you'll be amazed that these don't seem to have anything in common. Morning Chess by Wilhelm Perfumery states that it's a bergamot, not a big surprise here, leather, galbanum, and at the base notes patchouli in black amber. Maybe it's the amber with, I don't know, I feel fruity. Let me double check with Belle. I feel very fruity here. I don't know what they mean by leather at the heart, because to me this is quite a fruitier a version of a very green fragrance. And it also has a little bit of this like scratchy feeling for me, almost, like when your throat starts getting a little bit scratchy. The scent itself, the way that it travels through my nose creates this a little bit of a scratchy feeling. There's something about it that's both round and scratchy. Very long lasting, very potent, only to be rivaled by no other than Frederic Malle Rose Cuir. And maybe that's why leather is listed in both. Here, I would say, out of everything I'm going to show you today, the most long lasting, with the most projection, with the most diffusion and sillage. It's absurdly strong. Frederic Malle Rose Cuir, I spray it twice, like on each hand or maybe like back of my head, and it will be there until I take a shower. It will be on the clothes until you wash it. So much so that I bought myself, what is it, 7 mil? I don't know, I think 2 years ago. And I like put it in a decant, and I was like, all right, this is gonna be like an easy one to just spray in the morning and keep going. I wear it once and I have to take 2 weeks off because it just rapes my consciousness. It's so potent. It never goes away. It's with you. You'll feel it the whole day and the next day on your clothes. So if you're looking for a real green beast, something that just will pretty much dominate the room, dominate every other fragrance, and let's say you have a super long day and you need something that kind of cheers you up, something that wakes you up because it's very aggressive. It's as I said, like these fragrances are very piercing kind of in nature. They're like these green arrows that are shooting from you. That will be Frederic Malle Rose Cuir. I think this is the kind of leather that it's hard for me to understand. It's so called like this green leather accord. Morning Chess and Frederic Malle Rose Cuirs, I would say, are probably 2 staple niche examples in this category. And I don't think I can handle either. Like, I'm perfectly fine with samples here and there. And these 7 mil, I feel, will last me years. As I told you, like, it's so potent, it's so long lasting that I need a break. Every time I wear it for one day, I need like a considerable break just to like refresh my palate. Another quick sanity check. If you look at the pyramid, you would still like find very little in common between these, because Rose Cuir by Frederic Malle states that it's geranium, blackcurrant, Sichuan pepper, leather, rose, vetiver, cedar. Right? Not much in common with, let's say, Wilhelm Perfumery Morning Chess beside rose and leather. And yet, I do find them to kind of belong to the same family. Alright, a teeny tiny kind of tangent and detour, because we just talked about the most potent, the most lasting green fragrance. A slightly different take, quite a different take, but second, I would say it's a close equal. Maybe it's just a little less torturous. Super lasting green scent. And the only fougere I'm going to talk about here, because at least it's listed as a fougere, I find it to be much less of a fougere and much more of this green on top of green fragrance, is Fathom 5 by Beaufort London. A very generous decant that was sent to me by my subscriber. Otherwise, I don't know how I would ever try it without blind buying. Woo! It's like spring in the underworld. It's very cleanly and believably described. Actually, this one where like I trust the pyramid, at least the beginning of it. It's very potent green notes, less heady, less light like in the previous cases, a little darker, a little more heart, like lower frequency, because there is a lot of wet soil in here. It's just one of those cases you have to smell it to believe it. It does smell like damp, wet soil with super strong puree of thick green leaves. Beside that, there are a lot of things here that are listed: a lily, mimosa, jasmine, black pepper, ginger, cumin, tangerine, blackcurrant, juniper berry, blah, 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 like oak moss, salt, vetiver, incense, a lot of things. But the absolute punchline of this fragrance is indeed super, like a slosh of like ground green leaves and wet, thick soil, like a rich soil. It is a little zombie-like. It has a little bit of this flavor of something not out of this world, as pretty much the brand would suggest. They do like to play around with the idea. And so, and that makes it a little bit more punk to me. It's unapologetically different, but it's, as I say, wearable. You know, like, it's a horrible word. But like, when we go to things that are that out of ordinary, you don't want to cross the boundary to the level of like, okay, interesting, but like, it's an interesting smell. You still want it to be a scent. You still want it to be something people will want to wear. That said, whoa, gothic, punk, very unorthodox. And we're coming back. We're coming up because this is actually going toward a heavier fougere-like category. But since I mentioned Frederic Malle Rose Queer, if you're looking for something super green and super punchy, but with a different, I would say, a bit of a rebellious take, Fathom 5 by Before London. Wow. Impressive. Okay. I cannot talk about these like super green, but with something fragrances without mentioning Hermes. Like, who could, right? The Jean-Claude Elena pretty much nearly is really, if not invented, established that kind of bitter green mango, swampy, wet green notes kind of trend with all their garden series for Hermes and like a variety of other things. One obvious candidate would be Hermes Rhubarb. It's their cologne line. Here, I would say rhubarb gives me a little bit of almost like a lychee, kind of a fruity roundness. This is probably the most bitter of all of the fragrances we're going to talk about today. I mean, Eau de Soir by Sisley also holds probably a top 3 by bitterness. But this is just straightforwardly bitter. And yet, the juxtaposition of this somewhat rounded, lycheest sourness of rhubarb, it's kind of cool. Very hard for me to wear. I tried and I tried and I tried. The only thing that saves it for me, which is, I don't know if it's a compliment or not, that it doesn't last long. I find that all colognes by Hermes, those like colorful bottles, they are kind of like 15 minutes and they're gone, more or less. If you know of any that are like super duper long lasting, please leave a comment below, let us know. So I would try it if you can find it either secondhand or if you're just a big fan of rhubarb in general. But again, it belongs to this category of strong, dense, high-frequency green fragrances, at least in my book. But another option, I guess we could talk about all the Jardin, all the garden series of Hermes. And I tried quite a few. Haven't really made good friends with either of them. But the one that I think fits into this selection just smoothly, super smoothly, and it's a little more, it's a little bit more bearable, a little more merciful version compared to rhubarb, is Jardin sous le Toile. I'll put the names down below, alright? And it's not as swampy and it's not as Mediterranean in nature as other garden flankers. They're not flankers, they're like their own fragrances in the series. This one I think is kind of closer, should I say, to Morning Chest. Morning Chest a little bit more, again, it's leather, but to me it's fruity. And this is just a little less sweet, just a tad less sweet. And I was surprised by finding that parallel, that Wilhelm Perfumery Morning Chess and fragrance that was created way before that on Jardin sous la Tuile by Hermes, that this is actually where it all started. Now there are so many varieties and this and that, but you can go wrong with one of the gardens by Hermes. I just had to bring it up, even though it's not quite my cup of tea, but I think if we want to have like a classic, a cult within this category, these green, somewhat tropical, somewhat fruity, with only teeny tiny hint of that unusual green fragrances, Hermes is where it's at. Jean-Claude Ellena perfected the art of making them both crisp, clear, very well-rounded and cohesive, and yet a little unusual. They're always a little like, something not quite, what's that? And the one that I want to offer you as the most user-friendly and potentially probably the cheapest out of all of these here is gonna be L'Occitane Herbe. I got it, I think the first time I got it was in the blind tasting that was sent to me by a subscriber. Fell in love with it, begged her to exchange something for something so I could get at least a treble. It's not that expensive, but I wasn't sure if I wanted a full-size bottle, and I actually really like how the bottle is packaged. So, L'Occitane Herbe kind of combines all of these notions of green mangoes, leaves, freshly cut grass, something lemony, something bergamoty, all together, but it's all of that combined, and you take a long exhale. It's kind of just comfy, still the same category, but it's much comfier than all of the above. So if I had to pick top 3, Herbe would be in that top 3. Because sometimes, as much as I respect Fathom 5, and that's kind of zombie spring, as much as I respect Frederic Malle Rose Cuir for like, they took a good idea, filled the gap in the market, and pretty much closed, they closed the book because they took it to extreme. As much as I respect the classics of Hermes Garden series, as much as I enjoy all kinds of niche varieties, Terenzi, Mille Harris, and Wilhelm Perfumery, and try to explore Sisley greenness, this is just something you just want to grab. You just want to grab and go. Herbe, I would say, is the most yes, I'm gonna say it, the most complimentary. It's something that I think everybody will love when you wear it. You can't win them all, right? You can't have a free lunch. If you want to be truly special, if you want to have something super unique, super niche and well crafted, this might be a bit underwhelming for you. But at the same time, if you get tired of difficulty and complexity and hard edges that niche perfumery every once in a while presents, this is just such an easy win. And as we're finishing up on Herbe, I just want to do again a sanity check to explain why I felt the need, instead of just sending you to a search green notes and perfumery, to actually make a dedicated video to it, because the pyramid will not necessarily tell you much about why are they similar. So Herbe, it's bergamot, pink pepper, ambrette, netty blossom, blackberry, rose hip, clary sage, grass, and bunch of like the usual kind of notes, coumarine, honey, musk. And yet, grass, green notes. I don't know what's responsible here for this creation of green mango, this subtle tropical fruitiness, and very subtle so. not this syrupy expected one, but very subtle, very kind of elusive almost. It's like, where is it? I find that lychee rose is yet another category of this like elusive, odd, fruity sweetness that is not gourmand, that is not truly fruity, and it's not truly floral, but it's a whole world. It's its own whole world, and we'll talk about it at some point if we haven't yet. But greenness with a subtlety. What is it? Rose hip with blackberry or honey? Why does it seem somewhat fruity to me? I don't know. I'm super proud of this collection because you wouldn't be able to really find these fragrances and string them together if you didn't actually smell them. I understand that everybody's nose is somewhat different, and there might be some disagreements, and some people might find these belong to the same family of green unusual fragrances. Some would say that they don't. But to me, in my personal wear, this is a very unique use case. And when I feel like green, leafy, grassy, but not dry herbs, not fougere, not eau de cologne, not exclusively shipper, and not anything that I would call like medicinal or dry herbs, like fresh, intensely green fragrances with a twist, that's where it's at. If you have fragrances like that in your collection or know of, please share in the comments below. Let's collect our own olfactory library with references and comparisons. It's a unique family, at least for me. I don't often have this desire, but when I do, I have 10 or almost more fragrances to choose from. I hope it was somewhat useful and entertaining for you to watch. Thank you so much for liking and subscribing. And with that, I'll see you in the next video. We'll be waiting for your comments.